I was a crematory assistant the night a body vanished. I thought I was alone in the crematory until I came back from my smoke break and found a body that wasn't supposed to be there. No tag, no record, no delivery. And the security camera footage? 5 minutes of static, right when it showed up. That body vanished before sunrise, and no one has ever explained how it got there or where it went. I'm a 21-year-old guy, and this happened 2 years ago. I was working part-time at a small family-run funeral home in southern Indiana. My job was mostly behind the scenes, helping in the crematory prepping and equipment cleaning, sometimes moving remains when needed. It wasn't glamorous, but the pay was decent, and honestly, it was peaceful. Dead people don't argue. I usually work the afternoon shifts, but one weekend, the funeral director asked if I could cover an overnight cremation. It was something I hadn't done in a while, and I was curious to see what the place was like after hours, when everyone else had gone home. There was a backlog, and he wanted 2 cremations processed by morning. Sounded easy enough. The place ran on a strict schedule, and I'd done solo late shifts before, so I figured I could handle it. Still, there's something different about being the only one in a building like that at night. So that Saturday I clocked in around 10:30 p.m. The building was cold and silent, just the low hum of the industrial freezer and the occasional pop of the old ceiling lights. Each footstep echoed down the empty hallway, making the place feel even more deserted. I started with the paperwork, 2 tagged bodies, both already signed in and waiting in cold storage. The forms were routine, but the quiet made every scribble of my pen sound loud. I logged everything and prepped the retort, the machine that does the cremation. There's a checklist you have to follow, and I double-checked every step just to be sure. Around 12:20 a.m., I loaded the first body into the retort and hit the cycle. It takes about 2.5 hours for a full cremation, so I settled in for a long wait. While it was running, I stepped outside to the back lot for a cigarette. The sky was overcast. It had that weird silence small towns get after midnight, no wind, no cars, just dead air. Even the street lights seemed dimmer, and for a moment it felt like I was the only person awake in the whole town. When I came back inside, something felt freaking different. The motion-activated hallway lights were off. Normally they flick on as soon as you come in the back entrance. I waved my hand, nothing. Had to use my phone flashlight. I figured the sensors were acting up again. Then I turned the corner and froze. One of the metal body trays had been pulled halfway out of the rack. Now that's not something that just happens. The racks have a lip to keep the trays in place. You have to physically yank it out, and I know I didn't touch that one. It was empty earlier, except now it wasn't. There was a body on it. No tag, no toe slip, no paperwork. Just a white sheet over a form and the unmistakable shape of a head, arms, and feet. I stood there for a full minute, just staring. It didn't make sense. The air felt heavy with unanswered questions. I checked the clipboard hanging by the cooler. Both scheduled bodies were accounted for. No new arrivals were listed, no unexpected entries. I thought maybe the funeral director had come by earlier and forgotten to log it. It seemed like a plausible oversight, but why would he leave it untagged? That was against protocol, a breach of the meticulous order we maintained. Trying not to panic, I called him, hoping for clarity. He picked up groggy and confused, his voice thick with sleep. Did we get any new deliveries, I asked. No, we didn't get any new deliveries tonight, he said, his tone firm yet puzzled. And I was home all evening, he added, sounding certain. I told him what I saw, my voice barely steady. There was silence on the other end, a pause that felt like an eternity. Then carefully he asked, "You're sure it's a body?" "Yeah," I said, my heart pounding. "It's not a dummy, not a bag. It's a person." The reality of it was undeniable. He told me to document everything. Take a photo, log the time, and move it into cold storage for the night. He'd check the mortuary logs in the morning. I didn't want to touch it. but I followed protocol, except when I pulled back the sheet to confirm it was a man, probably late 50s. No visible injuries, eyes closed. But something was wrong. His skin was pale, sure, but it looked dry, tight, like it had been out too long. And there was this smell, not rot, not chemicals, just something stale. The worst part, his face was familiar. I couldn't place it at first, but I knew I'd seen him before. I slid the tray back in and locked it. Then I checked the outside delivery log again. Still no entries. No hearses had pulled in. No one had called. Nothing. That night dragged. The rest of the shift was uneventful, except I kept glancing toward the cold storage room, half expecting the tray to roll back out by itself. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the cremation cycle finished. I processed the remains and prepped the second retort. Around 3:30, I went back to check on the mystery body, just to make sure it was still there, but it was gone. I opened the cooler. The tray was still locked into place, but it was empty. The sheet was gone. No sign of movement, no sounds, nothing. That was when I really started to panic. I called the director again, woke him up a second time, told him it was missing. He didn't believe me at first, thought I was joking or just sleep deprived. He said, "I'll be there in a few." He came later that morning. I showed him everything. The photo of the body he asked me to take, the logs, the empty tray. Then we decided to check the security footage, hoping for some kind of explanation. Between 2:41 and 2:46 a.m., exactly 5 minutes, the camera feed suddenly turned to static as if something had interfered with it. All we could hear was that loud, unbroken white noise, filling the room and making the silence feel even heavier. Before and after that window, the footage was crystal clear, showing nothing out of the ordinary. But during those 5 minutes, there was absolutely nothing, just a blank, empty gap in the video. When the feed finally returned, the cremation tray was empty, as if whatever happened had left no trace at all. The funeral director just stared at the monitor for a long, tense moment, his face unreadable. Then he turned to me and whispered, "Don't tell anyone about this. Not yet. We need to figure out what happened." I asked if he thought someone had broken in, or if it was a bad joke. He didn't answer, he just looked away. Later that week, he called me into his office and quietly said the matter was being handled internally and not to worry. He told me I could stay on if I wanted, but overnight shifts were no longer an option for me. I didn't even have to think about it. I packed my things and quit that very same day, unable to shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. A few weeks later, I found out why the guy looked familiar. A friend of mine showed me an article from 2 years ago about a missing person from our town. Middle-aged man owned a bait shop near the river. Vanished without a trace. Body never found. The photo in the article? Same guy. Same face. Even the same shirt. I don't know how he ended up in our crematory that night. I don't know where he went after. All I know is whatever happened in that building, whatever I saw, it wasn't a mistake. Someone brought that body in, and someone took it out. I still check the cameras around my apartment every night. I'm freaking paranoid. Because I keep thinking I was never alone in that building. That body came and went somehow, some freaking way. What if I'm still not alone? What would you have done? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more horror stories every week. The funeral home secret. They tried to hide. I was cleaning a man's face in the prep room when I noticed tiny puncture marks all over his scalp, like someone had stabbed him with a sewing needle. There were more under his fingernails, jagged and uneven. I asked my supervisor about it, and she just stared at me and whispered, "Don't ask questions. In fact, stop work on him and place him in cold storage." I didn't get to finish the preparation. The next morning, 2 plainclothes detectives showed up. That body had no business being in our funeral home. I'm a 34-year-old woman, and I've been working in the funeral industry for a little over 3 years now. I mostly handle prep work, washing, disinfecting, suturing, basic cosmetic reconstruction, and assisting with embalmings. It's not glamorous, obviously, but I don't mind it. There's something peaceful about the stillness. The dead are very quiet. They don't judge you, they just exist. This happened on a Thursday around 2:30 in the afternoon. The kind of quiet day where the phone barely rings and the air in the prep room feels heavier than usual. My boss Sheila called me in and said we had a rush case. A man had been brought in that morning around 7. His family requested a closed casket ceremony due to sensitive circumstances. Sheila didn't want the normal cleaning and prep of the body and mandatory ID. She told me nothing fancy, no cosmetics, no stitching, just presentable enough for a family visual. He was in his late 40s, white male, medium build. With Sheila not allowing an exam of the body, no obvious trauma was known. No autopsy incisions were performed, which was really odd, since the cause of death was listed as pending investigation. But sometimes the coroner's office fast-tracks certain cases without full exams. I was going to do as I was instructed. When I unzipped the bag, there was this smell, not the usual post-mortem odor. It was something sharper, metallic, sour, like bad meat that's been microwaved. His skin was pale and waxy, with faint bruising along the neck and wrists. At first I thought maybe ligature marks, but they were too thin and irregular. Then I started cleaning his face. That's when I saw the punctures, tiny, maybe the size of a pushpin. Some healed, others fresh. I counted at least 10 scattered across his scalp, almost in a grid pattern. They looked very intentional. Not hospital IVs or trauma wounds. These were made by someone without any medical training. And then I checked his hands. There were punctures under his fingernails, deep enough that the beds had split. I lifted one of his hands and noticed something even more disturbing. His palms had a faint, blotchy discoloration like blood pooling from the inside. I'd seen lividity before, but this wasn't that. There were some weird happenings. Really weird. Due to the fact I was instructed not to do a full body exam, I took a photo on my phone of what I could see, not to post or anything, just to have a reference, covering my ass. I figured maybe Sheila would want to report it. When I showed her the photo, she didn't even blink. She just stared at it for a second, then looked at me and said, "Just finish him and don't ask questions. In fact, just stop work and place him in cold storage, and please don't take any more photos." That's when the hair on my arm stood up. Sheila isn't the kind of woman who gets rattled. She's worked homicide scenes. She's dealt with burnt corpses, bloated drownings, you name it. But she looked scared. I went back to the prep room and did what she asked. Cleaned him up, wrapped him properly, logged the case and sealed the refrigeration unit. Nothing else was said for the rest of the day. The next morning I came in a little later, around 11:30 a.m. Before I even clocked in, I noticed 2 men in plain clothes speaking with Sheila in the office. One of them had a badge clipped to his belt. They didn't ask for me, but they took our embalming records, copies of the intake, time, and preservation logs, and oddly enough, the security footage from the back entrance where the body was brought in. After they left, I cornered Sheila in the break room and asked what was going on. She snapped at me. "Mind your business, please. Don't dig. Let this one go." It bothered me. A lot. So I reached out to a friend of mine who works for the county medical examiner's office, just asked her if there'd been anything unusual that week. She called me back that evening, whispering like she didn't want anyone to hear. The man we really didn't fully process. He was found unalive in a locked studio apartment, alone. No signs of forced entry, no signs of a struggle, nothing out of place. After they removed him from your funeral home, the coroner opened him up. He was missing several internal organs, his liver, his kidneys, and one of his lungs. The surgical precisions were horrendous, just crude removal like someone had done it with garden shears and no anesthesia. They ruled it homicide within hours, but kept it off the books. The part that made my blood run cold? The body was never supposed to be sent to our funeral home. We weren't on the list. We weren't even in that district. Someone either rerouted it or dumped it with forged paperwork. That means someone wanted it hidden, and we were the hiding spot. He was in our facility for almost 18 hours before they removed him. The embalming records, the prep work, I had unintentionally helped hide evidence. The work was never done by me. I asked my friend if they had any suspects. She said no. But they did find fingerprints on his thighs. They were small, like from someone with very small hands, maybe a woman. She told me to be careful. I never heard a mention of that body again. The case disappeared from the system a few days later. The file was marked as transferred, but no one would say where it went. The scariest part? 2 weeks later, I came in for my shift and found out Sheila was no longer working with us. She'd moved on to better things, so they said. That was a shock out of the blue and very strange. I still don't know who got him here or why they picked us. But I never work on a body alone anymore. It will definitely always be a team job. I had to change my number after someone called me last week, telling me forget what I saw, even though I didn't see anything I wasn't allowed to. Your next nightmare is waiting. Tap subscribe before it finds you first. I was a mortician in training. The body that vanished. I was prepping a body that was supposed to be a suicide. Rope around the neck, rural cabin, no witnesses. But then I found splinters under his nails and needle marks in his feet. That night I opened the cooler to store him and found another body in the same drawer. It wasn't logged. The tag was blank. No ID. When I went to get my supervisor, Mr. Collins, the second body was gone. This happened 6 years ago when I was 25. I was doing an internship at a small family-owned funeral home in northern Alabama, kind of out in the middle of nowhere. I'd always had this weird fascination with mortuary science, something about bringing dignity to people in death. It made me feel useful, like I was helping close a chapter for grieving families. My supervisor was a man named Mr. Collins, late 70s, silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses. He'd been in the business for over 40 years. Soft-spoken, polite, old school. He ran the place almost entirely by himself. And to be honest, I respected the hell out of him. But something always felt off. He didn't let me help with body pickups. Said it was too much liability. He always handled the paperwork alone. And sometimes I'd come in and see a body already on the table. No log, no name, no police report. When I asked about it, he'd wave it off. Unclaimed. State drop-offs. Happens more than you'd think. Anyway, about 2 months in, we received a body from the sheriff's department. A man in his 40s, decent shape, name was Daniel Greaves, found hanging in a shed behind his cabin. The official cause of death was suicide. His sister dropped off the paperwork. Real nice lady. She stated Daniel was acting strange lately. He thought someone was following him, said he didn't sleep, was convinced his phone was bugged. They thought maybe he had a psychotic break. It all sounded like a tragic but open and shut case. Mr. Collins told me to start the prep, so I got him cleaned and on the table. That's when I noticed the dirt under his fingernails caked in. But not just dirt, splinters, little bits of wood, deep in the nail bed like he'd been clawing at something hard. That didn't match the scene. He was found hanging from a rafter, no signs of struggle, but his fingertips were torn up. And then there were the needle marks, not in the arms, where you'd expect a drug user or a medical patient. These were in the soles of his feet, 2 tiny punctures barely noticeable. But I'd seen enough to know what I was looking at. Something didn't add up. I brought it to Mr. Collins. He looked at the body for maybe 2 seconds, then said, "Nothing unusual, post-mortem artifact. Don't mention it to the family. It'll just upset them." His voice wasn't angry, but there was this finality in it, like the discussion was over. I didn't argue. I was an intern, but it gnawed at me. That night I stayed late to finish prepping. Collins left around 8 p.m. and said he'd be back early in the morning. By 11:30 I was wrapping up. I wheeled Daniel into the cooler. Our unit had 15 drawers. 2 were empty. I opened one and started sliding him in, and that's when I realized something was wrong. There was already a body inside, in the same drawer. I jumped back, the other body a male, late 60s maybe, thin, bruised, covered with a sheet, no tag, no ankle label. Just laying there, ice cold and still. My first thought was that I'd made a mistake. Checked the logbook. Only Daniel was signed in. I pulled the drawer out fully to get a better look. The second man, his eyes were open, wide open, staring right at the ceiling, and his mouth was slightly parted, like he'd died mid-breath. I bolted from the cooler and called Mr. Collins. No answer, left a voicemail, panicked, said there was an unlogged body in the unit. Then I waited in the front office for about 20 minutes, trying to calm down. When I worked up the nerve to go back, I opened the cooler, and the second body was gone, just gone. The drawer was empty, only Daniel was there, laying on the table where I had left him. I checked every other drawer, just single bodies in 2 empty drawers. Now I knew I wasn't crazy. I'd seen that face. The body, the bruises, the eyes. I stayed up in the front office all night with the lights on. Mr. Collins didn't return my call that night. Collins showed up at 6 a.m. I told him everything. He smiled, not in a comforting way, more like someone trying to hide something. Stress does strange things, he said. Sleep deprivation happens to all of us eventually. You're doing fine. Don't worry about it. I pressed him and asked if there had been another delivery, a late drop-off. He denied it, said no one came in, no bodies, no visitors. But when I asked to see the security footage, he said the cameras had been malfunctioning for weeks. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. A few days later, I stayed behind again. I waited until Mr. Collins left, then dug through the old records in the basement. There were dozens of folders with no names, just dates, cause of death, and a big stamp, unclaimed. One of them had a photo paperclip to it. It was the second man, the one from the cooler. His sheet said, accidental overdose, delivered by state facility, no ID, cremation scheduled, but there was no cremation tag, no tracking, no chain of custody, just a date and a time. I looked up the name of the facility on the sheet. It was a state psychiatric hospital. I made copies of what I could and left for the night. A few days later, I found an old article online, something buried deep in a local newspaper archive. It mentioned a quiet investigation into cremations of state patients. John Doe's, people without family scam and cover-up. And the name listed under staff contact was Eugene Collins. He wasn't cremating the bodies. How many bodies was Mr. Collins hiding? What was he doing with the bodies? I never returned to work after that. I didn't file a report. I didn't tell anyone. Because some of those files, they weren't old. Some were dated last freaking week. And someone was still dropping bodies off. I live in a different state now. Changed my number. But last month I got a package with no return address. Inside was a blank toe tag and a photo of me at my new job. What would you have done? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more horror stories every week.